All right, welcome back in the studio with Kevin Savage, a podcast for producers, and we've been talking about social media, the kind of the current iteration of the music distribution era, or industry, and kind of, we were talking about the old guard, capital and connections being kind of the main things, and kind of how those things have shifted from the old guard to this new guard and the social media revolution. We're going to go ahead and look at pretty much all the major social media platforms, talk about kind of what they've brought, kind of their unique qualities, and a little bit of, honestly, on each one I'll be giving a little bit on kind of my recommendation, if I have any, on how to leverage those platforms for your own distribution and exposure and kind of getting your name as an artist or a producer out there. So first off is Facebook. Honestly, at this point, they're probably the biggest social media platform, at least in a more traditional sense. Users have a personal profile, they add people they know, interact with them by sharing anything from personal thoughts to photos and articles. It's basically, the two big ones, when they, the early days, it was MySpace, Facebook, because they both basically offered the same thing. Obviously, Facebook beat out MySpace, and since then, they've kind of taken the lion's share of that traditional social media. This is who you are, basically, on the internet. Jobs, these are your jobs you have, these are the schools you've gone to, these are your likes, interests, and all that has radically changed over the years. But, I think Facebook has ultimately become synonymous with social media. So because we could spend, honestly, an episode on each one of these platforms, I'm going to be a little brief and kind of hit the main points for each one of the platforms. So Facebook, I think the first thing to talk about would be pages, especially, looking at it from an artist standpoint. Facebook pages have kind of been used from everything from brands to influencers, public figures, politicians, etc. I think it is a useful platform, but honestly, it has become less so in these later days of social media. In the past, it's been a great platform to share content. I think it would still be foolish not to have a Facebook page for your as an artist or a record label or whatever you are. But Facebook has essentially kind of shifted the organic growth and ability to grow a page organically. They obviously are a business. They need to make money. So now you can obviously have a page. It's free. Put your content on there. You can have a movie as your banner, or your background image. There's still a lot of stuff you can do. You can track metrics and kind of see your reach. But back in the day, your posts that you would share on your Facebook page, not your personal page, but your artist page, would reach the people who've liked your page. It still reaches people now, but it's less prioritized. So Facebook essentially, at least from my understanding, although I haven't done a lot of research, but based on the kind of the general consensus of a lot of people who are out there really trying to figure out social media and leverage it, basically now if you want your content from your Facebook page to really get out there, you have to boost the posts and you have to kind of pay money to kind of get your exposure out there. So it's no longer as easy to organically reach people with your Facebook page without people sharing your content. So it's still useful. I still see especially some political pages and some meme pages grow pretty fast and have a lot of people and a lot of interaction, but it is harder if you're not constantly posting content that people want to share always. And that's a lot of it because, honestly, the Facebook algorithm has deprioritized pages. So pages are still useful. You can sell merchandise. You can have reviews if you're kind of like a business. There's still a lot of stuff that you can do with a page. It's a good kind of hub, but it probably won't grow as fast as some of the other platforms that are out there. On the other hand, Facebook has a thing called groups, and groups have been prioritized. So I think it was a couple months back, Facebook even had like a banner that basically said, all in on groups. And so I think that's important to consider. And I think it honestly makes sense. Pages will probably take people away from Facebook, whereas groups really keep people in Facebook. And as like any social media platform, they don't want you to leave because that's how they make money. That's how they can get their sponsored content in front of you. They can show that there's a lot of users at any given point, and then they can basically leverage that data with advertisers and kind of, prove to advertisers that you should be advertising on their platform. And honestly, all of the social media platforms are really have the same mindset because that's how they're going to grow as a company. But I think Facebook groups are useful. Obviously, you kind of have to figure out how they are useful for you as an artist. I know, for example, on my YouTube page, I do tutorials. So I was trying to figure out, hey, how do I get people to come to my YouTube videos, and how do I get people kind of sharing their own YouTube videos and what I've created with. It's a very small group, but I created a kind of a small Facebook group kind of centered around YouTube production tutorials and content kind of adjacent to that. And so the whole goal is share your favorite YouTube videos that help you learn how to produce music. And obviously it gave me a platform to share mine, to kind of get people to see my videos. And then hopefully I could obviously watch some stuff that other people have shared. So groups are useful. Now as an artist, again, you may have to leverage it almost adjacently to your artist profile, but at least if you have like a group sharing stuff that maybe isn't directly related to your content, but is close enough that it kind of keeps people interested and active. And obviously, if you've played your cards right, you've got your name associated with it, so it constantly keeps your name in the mind of your fans. And if it's active, people are going to want to invite their friends and share with people who have similar interests, and it'll help you kind of organically grow. Also, live. That's another facet of Facebook. I mean, there's a lot of facets of Facebook, but live is another useful one. I think live is a little bit more straightforward in its usefulness to artists, at least, when it comes to kind of getting people to see you and your content. Now, live used to, I feel like, be a little more popular maybe a few years ago. It's kind of dwindled, at least from what I've seen. I don't see a ton of people going live all the time on my Facebook. It might be different for you, but that's at least my perception. But I think it's still a good opportunity if you could figure out a way of kind of going live on a number of platforms to kind of share out your content, get fans, no matter if maybe they're big Facebook users, maybe you have some fans that are big Instagram users, some fans that are big YouTube users. If you can figure out a way of kind of cross-platform streaming, then you can go live at the same time, produce content that kind of goes to all these different platforms and really kind of engage with your audience. And I think that's the usefulness of live, is you want people interacting with you, sharing that, the single that you're about to release and kind of making this exclusive experience. And you can get direct feedback right there from your fans, whether it's love or criticism. So those are kind of the big ones. Pages, groups, live are the big ones for Facebook. There are other ones. Maybe we'll talk about them in the future. But those are the ones that I think it's important to think about when talking about Facebook. The other big giant would be Instagram, which is owned by Facebook. But Instagram is a very photo-focused platform. So it may be a little bit trickier to leverage Instagram as an artist. It's all about the aesthetics, whether it's memes or daily life or creative imagery, graphic art, whatever. That's kind of the center of Instagram. When people think about Instagram, I would assume that's kind of what they think about. Now, there have been some artists, especially in the beat community, that have really figured out how to leverage content like this. I'm not sure if maybe it's about a minute or like 30 seconds worth of their latest beat, or, they have kind of a fun little video they've created that shows them showcasing their beat, and getting that out there has allowed them to basically then pull people in, funnel them to their bio, where they then basically have links to purchase that beat or check out some of the other stuff, whether it's their YouTube work or whatever. Now, it is a little trickier because while they may be able to focus someone to basically funnel someone to their bio, you can only have one link in your bio. So luckily there are platforms nowadays like Linktree, among others, that allow you to basically have multiple links in one link. So that's how you're able to obviously share more than just one thing. Now, the downside is you have to figure out a way of creatively funneling your audience to that link, because you can't put a link in your posts. You can, so that's why I think honestly the phrase #link in bio is so grew in popularity, because the link is in the bio and you can't put the link in the post. Now, like Facebook, you do have a live option as well. So it's similar to Facebook, encourage fans to check out your links, stuff like that. Engage with your audience. You can see what they say to you. You respond back. You can see who's watching, say, hey, stuff like that. Be very personal. So yeah, that's, it has a live feature. I honestly think that both Instagram and Facebook have become a little bit more tired or normie. They are, when it comes to the younger generation, obviously people they're there, but they're also kind of verging out to other platforms that are new and fresh, which we'll talk about in future or later on in this episode. But honestly, there's still a substantial user base on both, so obviously your presence should be there. Now, I think what's interesting with Instagram, there's a few things, but most social media platforms use hashtags, and I think Instagram was the one that, at least in my notice, it was like Instagram and Twitter were the ones that I noticed were the first to really favor hashtags to kind of organize content. And essentially what a hashtag does is, depending on what platform it is, it either pushes, it's a way for basically audiences to kind of narrow in on a particular topic, and it's organized by that hashtag, under that hashtag. And it'll, and hashtags can be really useful for you to basically build viral campaigns and kind of build a brand up, but it can also be a great way to funnel new people to your content. So, say you're trying to get just users in Berlin to check out your music, you live in New York, doing hashtag NYC and hashtag Berlin, you'll get a little bit of users from both, because you've kind of targeted those regions. And I think it could be a really useful way of building exposure. Now, I think Instagram was also one of the first to utilize a story. At least that was the first. I think it was Snapchat was the first to utilize a story, and then the big one to kind of had a story that in a platform that was a little bit more. You could basically follow anyone, because in Snapchat it's a little bit different. We'll briefly talk about Snapchat at the end, but basically the story was a great way to kind of showcase stuff that maybe you don't want to clutter up your homepage, your profile with, but still kind of constantly get people noticing you, because you basically show up at the very top of the homepage, of the user's homepage. So it's a great way for fans to see content, also share updates, start challenges, other things. It is really useful to leverage a loyal fan base, because you can have people ask you questions or answer polls, or, show off the music you're listening to or stuff like that, on just kind of, it's almost like, it's like a photo version of Twitter where you're constantly kind of updating people. So that, stories is another big aspect of Instagram. Also, I think Instagram is the one that I, see a lot more sponsors kind of seeing, oh, you have this particular person who we call an influencer because they've got a large fan base or large following, fans reaching out, or not fans, sponsors reaching out and basically saying, hey, we'll pay you X amount of money to basically do a post with our content in it. And so it's a really great democratization where, you could be just a random person, but if you've built enough of a following on a particular niche of content, you can basically partner with brands that also kind of exist in that niche to basically showcase their products. So maybe you're a producer, you've got a huge following, maybe you can partner with Isotope or partner with, I don't know, Ableton or whatever brands out there that are constantly reaching out to influencers in a particular brand to basically do a giveaway or showcase or get a discount or whatever. So I think Instagram's really great for that if you're good at kind of and very savvy social media wise and kind of building a loyal fan base and you're very consistent. And good at obviously making videos and photos. Now there is an underutilized and the jury's still up in my opinion on this particular aspect of Instagram. They created a couple years ago a thing called IGTV. It's kind of like I don't know, it feels almost like a YouTube for Instagram. It's a separate platform, but it still shows up on the main platform. But it basically allows you to release content that's longer than just 1 minute or 30 seconds or whatever the time limit is on Instagram. And it allows you to basically share videos. But it's all in a very, it's like long, I forget the term, but it's like 9:16, not 16:9. So it's kind of like a vertical frame. So it's a little unusual of a platform. I'm honestly not sure the best way of leveraging it, but it's something to check out. Obviously, if you're producing content for video content, you might as well, if you can figure out how to make it work for you, also produce that content for Instagram or IGTV, excuse me. But again, jury's still out on IGTV. Sorry, we've got a lot to get through. We've got a lot of these social media platforms, so might get a little bit faster as we go along, but I just want to kind of cover as many of the bases as possible. So the next one is YouTube. Honestly, other than Facebook, YouTube is the monster in the house. It's the biggest. It's a huge, incredible platform for artists, especially those who are video savvy, to build a real loyal following of subscribers and monetize through sponsorship and ad revenue. They make it a lot easier once you get to the point, once you meet the particular threshold and criteria to be able to get sponsorships and, well, not sponsorships, but advertisements. They make it really easy to partner you with the right advertisers and then ultimately make a little bit of money on the side, or a lot of money if you're PewDiePie. If you're someone, I think it's really useful. Maybe you're someone who likes to educate, or you're someone who just lives a really interesting life. YouTube is really great where you may release music, so you share music, you put those in playlists, but also you release content on a weekly or bi-week, or twice a week or monthly basis, where you basically show how to make something, making a beat in Ableton, or how to use Serum, or if you're someone who just lives a really interesting life, you do like a daily or weekly vlog, and as you kind of showcase these things and build a following, you can really basically funnel those people to your music, while simultaneously getting ad revenue, maybe at some point leveraging sponsors to basically pay you per video. And some of those deals can be pretty decent depending on your subscriber base. Now, the downside is it does take, it's a downside, but most of the platforms have this downside. But it can take a while to build a following. YouTube is very saturated. There's a lot of people who are constantly on it, a lot of people making content for it. So the barrier for entry can be a little steep. I think you need 1,000 subs with 10,000 hours of watch time in a year to start monetizing. even to get a custom URL, which you could honestly get with no followers on Facebook, you requires a minimum of 100 subs. And then if you want to do live stream, which obviously Facebook, Instagram, anyone can live stream. On YouTube, unfortunately, you have to have actually 1,000 subs. I think it's 1,000 subs to basically live stream, unless you use some third-party applications. And then if you want to be able to do, I mean, we've got stories and you've kind of got these like wall posts, right, for, Facebook, Instagram, etc. But on YouTube, if you want to be able to do it, I think you actually need, it's either 10,000 subs to basically have that, because you got to be like a part of the YouTube creator community that has a certain amount of like clout, essentially, to basically be able to unlock that feature. So while it's a useful platform, I really like it. I release content to there, as you well know, but it is a grind. It takes a lot of work if you don't have a big following to really build it up there. Now, one of the platforms that I am less familiar with, but is still important, is Twitter. It's an interesting platform. I don't really, honestly, I'm not very savvy with it. I don't know a ton about it. I do know that hashtags are key on that platform. I also know that it's at least if you're writing a post or you're trying to share a lot of word content, you're not going to use Twitter for that, because you could only have I think it's 240 characters, which is not a lot of words. It used to be 120, so they've given you a little bit more, but it's still a lot less. I think Twitter is really great if you can build a following to kind of keep people engaged. You tend to see a lot of like snarky comments or people sharing memes or pictures. Little short snippets of video also play pretty decently in Twitter. But it is another challenging platform to basically really build a following on, because essentially you got to come up with a post that goes viral. A lot of times you see it tend to be more controversial posts, or if you just blow up on another brand and you're able to funnel the followers over. Now, Twitter, I think, is also interesting because of a big blunder that, in my opinion, they did, which is they basically bought Vine and then shut it down because they couldn't figure out how to make it make money. That was a dumb idea, in my opinion, but in the ashes of Vine grew out TikTok, so that's always nice, and we'll talk about TikTok a little bit here towards the end. And then they also are known for basically, I think they own Periscope, but they're connected to Periscope, which is a live streaming platform similar to like Twitch, but it is a little lesser known. Check it out, I guess. I think we'll maybe check it out someday, but there's so many platforms that you should be on that I feel like Periscope is kind of not the one where everyone's on. I think it used to be more popular and has kind of died because live streaming is available on Twitch and all these other platforms as well. Now, one that you may be familiar with, it is kind of the platform where you share your resume, but maybe you don't realize that there actually is a pretty big social media component, is LinkedIn. It used to pretty much be just you share your resume, but I think Microsoft acquired it and really said, hey, we're going to try to make this like its own social media platform. And honestly, don't sleep on it. It's a really important platform. It's actually changed. It's really opened my eyes up a lot as a social media platform, especially on a professional sense. So if you're just an artist and you're targeting younger people, I don't think you should just focus on that. But if that's what your target, that's all you care about, then yeah, okay, maybe you're not going to use LinkedIn. But in my opinion, that doesn't make any sense. You should try to target other people out there, whether it's other brands and businesses or older folks or professional contacts. Because, for example, maybe you make pop music, you're a pop music producer and singer. You should definitely have a LinkedIn presence and try to leverage it to maybe get a a contract with like an actual brand to produce music for one of their episodes. I've used it for freelance work. I've built two, on LinkedIn, we've got two social media company profiles for this podcast as well as a YouTube channel or just the Kevin Savage brand. And it's really useful to kind of just share content out there, and then I'll share it on my personal LinkedIn and try to kind of build attention. And, I've used LinkedIn to basically acquire freelancing work to produce music for, companies that are looking for music in some of their videos. So I would recommend, especially if you are someone who produces your own music, which my guess is you do because you're listening to this podcast, you should definitely be checking out LinkedIn as a way of kind of connecting on a professional level with brands or music supervisors or recording houses or stuff like that to really kind of get your presence out there in the professional world. Why wouldn't you want to have a placement in a TV, film, or commercial? Like, those contracts are real. There's a lot of money in there, so you should be on LinkedIn. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but Snapchat, we definitely need to mention. They're kind of the OG story platform. It feels more like a place where, I haven't been on there in a while, but it very much feels like a place for friends to communicate. So if you figure out a way of kind of doing that, you've got, you could share your Snapchat if you're a big enough brand and kind of you constantly update it, and people, check it out, can shoot you direct messages, stuff like that. But I feel like all of those features kind of exist on other platforms. So it doesn't, use Snapchat if you're already using it, but I don't feel like it's a platform that you need to jump over onto immediately if you haven't already been using it. Except for one feature, which I think is really interesting that I haven't really seen on other platforms, and it's geotagging with overlays. So basically, you can definitely have kind of like tags for like overlays for like Facebook. I don't know if you can use overlays in like other platforms, but I don't know if you can like have them freely available to other people. And especially, I don't know if you can have them where if you are in a particular place at a particular time, you can take a photo or a video and then overlay a custom overlay. And that's something you can actually do on Snapchat. It's expensive and it may not be worthwhile, but you could actually basically say this during, I don't know, January 1st through January 5th in this particular region of Central Park. Anyone who's taking a video or a photo on Snapchat can use this particular overlay that you've custom made that kind of advertises your stuff. It's really expensive. I've looked into it. It's like thousands of dollars to do that, especially in somewhere that's really saturated with a lot of people like New York City. Now, if you're in a smaller area, it's more affordable, but even in that case, it's kind of like, then is it really even worth it? So something to consider if you've got a particular need for it, or maybe you figure out a way of creatively utilizing it. But again, Snapchat, not really the place that you need to put a ton of focus in if you aren't already. Twitch is another big one, especially in the live streaming world. If you're someone who's maybe a producer and you're trying to figure out a way of kind of, you're already there producing music, why not record what you're producing? If you're someone who's comfortable on camera or likes to talk, or you're quick and you want to showcase your talents. If you're someone who's a performer, maybe you set up a camera, live stream it, have communication with your audience. It's useful, I think, because you can really customize it using like OBS and open broadcast software and some other stuff to basically get tips and start conversations and create other different kind of customizable features, build goals and challenges and stuff like that. It is a bit tricky to use, so if you're not tech savvy, you may find a little more of a challenge, but I am seeing, especially on Twitch, a number of people who are using it as like a IRL, in real life kind of streaming. And, it's kind of like vlogs are more polished. They're like short, concise, 10-minute videos, 5-minute videos, and 15-minute videos. But with Twitch, the goal is almost like how long can you stay on there and kind of keep people with you. So it's definitely worth checking out. It's definitely been geared more towards gamers, but I think things are changing. I've encouraged some friends who even produce content that's like seems totally unrelated to something that you would see on Twitch to move over to Twitch, especially because Twitch is still kind of an underutilized platform unless you're a gamer. So I think it's something worth checking out and kind of thinking about how you can leverage it for your own brand. We are almost to the end. Only a few left. TikTok. They are the newbie to the table, to the field. They're like Vine 2.0, but better in my opinion. It used to be, I think, for TikTok, it was 15-second videos. They've shifted it to like 30 or 60-second videos. Basically, it's a little hard to explain, but basically you produce a minute video or 30-second video or whatever video, no more than a minute, and it basically loops. A lot of times it's kind of like little skits and sketches. It started off, it's very much a music-centric platform. It started off as kind of this like lip-syncing, funny lip-sync video content, but I know Kyle Beats had an interview with Illusion that you should definitely check out, where he talks about how he literally blew up in like a week by utilizing TikTok's algorithm and kind of tricking the system. So check it out. It's really useful because when you produce a TikTok video, if you're using your audio, not some like all other song, which you can use, you can select from their whole list of songs that are out there. Pretty much any song that exists out there you could basically use, and then use that as kind of your soundtrack to your TikTok. But if you're creating original music or original audio, people can then do duets and kind of basically repurpose your audio, which is really interesting because if you can build a following that way, it can kind of spiderweb out really nicely and bringing people in and checking out your content. And you can kind of go viral, become a meme. That's honestly how Old Town Road blew up. They did like a dance with their song and people started catching on and people copied it. And it's very much like a copycat platform, like people copying other people but doing it differently. So it's all very, very interesting. I also really like it because the algorithm is so young that you can leverage it really nicely. And even if you have no followers, people will see your content, unlike unlike YouTube, where if you have no subscribers, you really have to hustle to get those subscribers. But if you tag correctly, you could post a video and overnight it get 100 views and maybe a couple follows and like a message, you know? So definitely, I mean, Gary Vee's talking about it. There's a lot of people out there who are like, if you aren't on TikTok, you're sleeping. You need to wake up and get on TikTok. Even if it's got the image of being for children, it's definitely worth leveraging as an artist. So the next one is not exactly a social media, but it definitely has that element. BeatStars and Airbit are these kind of, at least when it comes to the beat community, they're huge for people selling beats. It's great because it has a file sharing aspect to it. You can do payment processing, licensing, and if you have a pro account, you can host a small website with your content on it. It definitely is more hip-hop centric, but it's useful, honestly, if you're a beat producer, you're a producer, and you can make beats or whatever to share your content on there and make some side cash. It is a little hard to get sales on there, I think, because it is a very saturated platform at this point, because everyone is on it trying to sell their beats. So you really have to kind of figure out, how do I push people, how do I grow a following of people who like my beats and then push them on there. And honestly, also, you need to be making beats all the time and constantly releasing them. That way you've got a huge portfolio of music. So it's a really great place though to like have a portfolio. You can even host like your stems, and people can purchase either the untagged MP3 or the tagged MP3 or untagged wave or like the stems, depending on how much they're willing to pay. And it's all processed, I think, through it's either Stripe or PayPal. So definitely, if you are a producer, you probably should be on there unless you figured out another way of like selling your beats or whatnot. But I mean, it's definitely the one that makes it the easiest for people to basically buy right there, and without a lot of they're a great middleman to use. Now there are some honorable mentions. A couple. I'm not sure if you would consider these social media platforms, but the three that I can think of right off the top of my head are Vamper, Craigslist, and Meetup. Vamper is a collab platform. It's still pretty new, but basically it's like if you're someone looking for a guitar player or a singer, you're a producer looking for a singer, you have your profile, you swipe. It's almost like Tinder for like media, like for music production and people looking for people to work with. So it's not exactly a social media platform, but it also kind of is. You're not really like sharing a lot of stuff out there. It's more like trying to meet people kind of in the industry. You also have Craigslist, which is basically dead. I was on there the other day looking to see if there's anyone trying to like hire for like someone to produce music for like a video. There's nothing. And honestly, it's kind of gotten a nickname of being a pretty sketchy place to go. Now, granted, I have met people there and produced music with them and formed really good relationships with regards to like music production. This was a few, like 3 or 4 years ago. So obviously things have changed since then. But you know, if you're bored and want to try to figure out if you can find some gigs or connections there for music production, you know, it's worth giving a shot, but be careful. And then you have Meetup, which would be a really useful tool to kind of organically kind of like have kind of a collective of people that meet up and share music, but I don't know if it's necessarily a way for you to build fans. If you are someone who is touring, it might be a useful way of kind of like doing little fan meetups in the different areas that you're going to be traveling to, which could be a way to connect with people, but it also is not exactly your typical social media. It's more like social media adjacent, but I think it's useful to mention. So those were the big social media platforms. Obviously, there's so many others. Steemit is a what's it called? A blockchain based social media platform. You have Reddit. I mean, those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. There's probably just tons out there that are like small and fledgling and could theoretically blow up down the road, but the ones that I've mentioned here are kind of the big ones to really keep in mind. Now, obviously, despite the democratization of social media, gatekeepers still exist, but ultimately, you know, especially if you think about all these social media platforms, they have significantly less power than they used to. Especially if artists are leveraging their social media platforms correctly and finding creative strategies to build fan bases. If you're an artist and you're not social media savvy, you're not going to survive unless you are paying someone who is, or you are signed to a label that, you know, hires someone to do it for you. You need social media today to basically build a following, a brand, and get your name out there, get people listening to your music, buying your products, etc. So, you know, obviously while FM radio is dead and Spotify playlists have become kind of the new radio gatekeepers, many playlist makers charge for a placement, but it is critical, honestly, to get your content there. I haven't really paid for any of my own personal music, but I also haven't released a ton of music lately. But I do have a friend who has used playlists, and I'm going to talk about her here in a second. So honestly, a good rule of thumb is you should probably spend twice as much money on advertising as you did on your creation of your album or your single, if that's the kind of artist you are. you really need an advertising budget. I think a lot of people kind of sleep on that. They think, oh, I'll just share it on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, I'll get views. But if you spend $1,000 producing your music, you want somewhat of a return on investment, So you should honestly plan to have $2,000 to spend on advertisement to get it on, to get it out there, to kind of build that momentum to really get people over to your content, especially if it's really good. So, have an advertising budget if you're an artist. Even though the democratization of social media has really made it that anyone can find you, you still need to do the legwork to be found. So basically, my story is I have a friend of mine who we did some work together in the past, got a few listeners here and there, didn't blow up anything crazy, under 1,000 plays, whatever. Now, she recently moved out to LA and worked with a producer out there. Spent a lot of time working on a track, got it out there as a single, and then said, all right, I am going to advertise this single. She was still doing shows. She was doing, she's, 14 or 15,000 followers on Instagram. So she's got a pretty big fan base. But even with that big fan base, she wasn't getting a lot of Spotify plays. Because, even with Instagram fans, there's a lot of bots. There's a lot of people who are just kind of these fake friends, they're not loyal followers. So I think she spent $100 to get it placed on the top of a medium-sized playlist, and just shared it every single day on her social media. So between sharing it on her social media, encouraging friends to share it on her social medias, and then getting it number one on this playlist, she was able to basically turn the under 1,000 listens on this new single to, at this point, I think it's been going strong for a few months, but at least it was 2 or 3 months in, she was at 40,000 streams. Now, she probably will not make the same return on investment as she has spent on advertising, but building, getting those listens, getting people who now become monthly listeners, those people are going to check out her Spotify page if they really like her. They're going to then check out her Instagram and her Facebook, and it's going to grow that. And it kind of really just, everything is interconnected and builds this momentum, and it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger, so that when she releases that next single, she's already got that huge list of monthly listeners. She could spend the same amount of money on placement in these playlists and ultimately even get more streams and maybe make back the revenue that she lost on the last playlist placement. Get more people to her shows. That's money in her pocket if she's selling tickets. Getting people to her Instagram, getting people to her Facebook, stuff like that. Gives her an opportunity to show brands that she's someone they should invest in. It all interconnects and is all really important to have an understanding of and have a coherent strategy, because that's how you grow as a artist in a time where you don't need necessarily the same connections and money. You need the savviness of these platforms and a coherent strategy. And honestly, she doesn't have a label backing her. She's entirely independent. She's got a manager, but and I also don't think she's sponsored any of her posts. It's all been organic, other than the payment for the playlist placement. So, I think the final takeaway is that artists have to capitalize and come up with a coherent strategy to grow a sustainable and cohesive artist and consumer relationship with their social media presence. Understanding metrics, doing some research into that, A/B testing, what works, what doesn't work, what thumbnails work, what thumbnails don't, what TikTok videos work, what TikTok videos don't. Constantly asking what works, what doesn't. Pushing yourself, saying, well, what's another new creative way of leveraging my Facebook group or whatever. And being consistent, which is a challenge for me. I think the last podcast I released was 2 months ago. Was busy. Sorry, guys. But building partnerships and relationships in their presence on social media is so critical, because that's now where exposure is. And you don't need to get on FM radio or XM radio. It's nice if you do, but if you're an independent artist, you're probably not going to unless you blow up Lil Nas X or whatever. this is where social media is at now. You know, this is where it's at, and this is critical to know and understand. We're going to talk about more of it in the future. I'll probably talk about it on my YouTube channel. That's not on this podcast. We're going to always be coming back to this, and it's always going to be in the conversation because at least in the foreseeable future, social media isn't going anywhere. So no final thoughts on this episode because it's a long one. I'm not even sure where we're at right now, but probably over an hour. But our next episode will be fun because we're going to look at the future. So it's all going to be kind of speculation based on some research and kind of just watching and seeing where the trends are at. I don't have any insider knowledge, so I don't know what these social media brands are thinking. I don't know, I know that it's going to be a tricky episode for me to research, so it's not just a 5-minute episode of me being like, yeah, so Facebook might have blah, 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 blah. So like to give you guys a little more content, I'm going to have to do some research, which is, going to be a challenge, but I'm excited to kind of see and think about where the distribution of music is going, at least towards the future. So, please help us grow. Please help this podcast grow. The only way that we're going to grow is if you're sharing our episodes. So, share the YouTube videos, share the podcast links, tell your friends and family about it if this is something that they're interested in. We took some time off this episode, took a long time to write. The next one's probably going to take a bit of time to write too. We were also busy with some other work and I wasn't feeling well. So we're back. Hopefully it's more regular. I hope I can get the next episode out next week or the following week at least. But don't worry, we're going to continue this saga, and we'll be uploading these episodes to YouTube for the most part. So, if you're not a subscriber there, please join us. I think we're at like 80-something. I want to hit that 100 so I can get a custom URL. Keep pushing so we can get that 1,000 and start to bring in that YouTube ad revenue, which would be really nice, and build more motivation to really produce this content. Because I love doing this, but it's it's also a lot of work. Patreon, $5 a month, gets the ad-free version of the podcast, and when we start releasing like sample packs and stuff like that, you'll have access to that. So if you support us, please. We would definitely appreciate it. Much love to all of you who are listening and watching, and we'll see you soon, okay?